Hi, I'm Dana Redfern, and I am an alcoholic. Thank you for giving me not one but two chances to come and share with you. My group, as Tony said, my home group is Primary Purpose Group. My sobriety date is June 11th, 1990. And the first meeting I went to that I thought I might actually come back to another meeting was here on a Tuesday night, the Big Book meeting back in 1990. So I'm kind of coming home to be here tonight. I did, as most people do, and tried to think of what am I going to say, and I had to let myself realize that whatever I was meant to say would come out when it was meant to come out. And if I tell other people to do that, the least I can do is allow it to happen in my own life. What it was like, what happened, and what I'm like now. Briefly, I had depression and self-esteem issues as a child. I can't remember when I didn't feel like I was not good enough for whatever. I was afraid to go knock on the door to borrow sugar when it had already been arranged by my mother and whoever was in the house. So I'm not sure where that came from, but it was deeply seated before I ever got old enough to think about drinking. Neither of my parents drank. I found out years later that my father had been drinking and had stopped when he had a blackout. Yeah, little red flag after I got in the program going, okay. And his father was quite a drinker and didn't stop until his heart stopped. As far as I knew, I had a pretty happy childhood. My father and I adored each other. He worked a lot, but the time we spent together was good quality time. And I'm really glad that I got to spend the time with him I did. He died when I was 9. So there were times that I was angry and upset and resentful about that, just as I was trying to figure out, turning into a young girl, into a teenager, and doing without my dad. And there were some tough times, and I definitely acted out a lot. My mother had always paired up with my brother and continued to do that, and it was not personal on her part. That's just how she was. She did the best she could. But I found myself, as I look back on it, I was very needy. I wanted acceptance. I wanted love and didn't think I was getting it. And I definitely looked for love in a lot of wrong places. When somebody suggested drinking, I was very shy. I did not like to call attention to myself. But somebody said, oh yeah, have a beer. And I thought, okay, I'll fit in. Hated the taste of the beer. Made myself drink it and found out I can relax a little bit. I can talk to people. And that was kind of a liberating moment. Didn't last long. And I can't really say that I ever reached a point where I drank and I hit this wonderful feeling and wanted to get that again. If I hit that, I went over it so quickly I missed it. So I drank to numb myself out. From the time I was tiny, I could pick up on emotions in a room full of people. And that was very uncomfortable for me. And when I drank, it kind of numbed that out a little bit. So again, it was easier for me to be around several people, like in a bar. Loved it. Still was shy to some degree, became a cocktail waitress at 18, got rid of the shyness, pretty much. Then decided I really liked being a bartender because I was so smart and sarcastic and I could control people by my sarcasm. I have been told since I quit drinking, some people took years before they had the courage to tell me that I could be quite vicious in my sarcasm, and try not to do that anymore. One of the things I'm working on. I continued down the road and drank more and more and more. I planned my drinking around the time the bar would close. I would keep myself at a certain level so that I would not be ready to pass out until time to go home or at least get in my car. Daylight savings time was a rude awakening. First time we had it. I had to adjust this clock in my body. Anyway, I was one of those drunks that bartenders the next day would not know I'd been drunk when I'd come in. I wouldn't remember the last 2 or 3 hours I'd been drinking, but I did not appear drunk most of the time. I continued to drink as the disease took on more strength and eventually got to the point where I was ready to get away from everything I knew because I was so dreadfully unhappy. I contemplated suicide many times. I had to go to a therapist when I was 16. I never actually tried to kill myself, but I had it all planned out and nearly did it a couple of times. Eventually, in 1984, I was quite miserable, and I met a young man from Australia in a bar. And within a week, he had asked me to marry him, and I said yes, and I moved to Australia. Well, you all know the reputation of Australian beer. It's strong. That reputation does not do it justice. It does taste good. It tastes a lot better than American beer, and it is strong. And again, I had to recalibrate my ability to drink when I got to Australia. But I was determined I was not going to limit my drinking to 1 or 2 or 3 beers and go home while everybody else was still having a good time. So my consumption of amounts of alcohol increased again. I did marry the young man, the Australian gentleman, and surprise, we both had a drinking problem. And we had a lot of other problems, too, that we had never dealt with. I don't know if he's dealt with his yet. Those are his. I'll leave that. But suffice to say, he was very controlling and isolated me quite a lot and helped fuel my belief that I wasn't good enough. And by the time I decided, of all the relationships in my life up to that point, that was the one I was going to make last. After nearly 6 years of abuse and drinking heavily, I was drinking about a case of Australian beer a day. And I was working, so I was squeezing that into not a lot of time. I would figure out my calorie intake according to the beer. If I was going to be drinking, I wouldn't eat lunch or dinner because I didn't want to get fat because I get criticized. And it took a long time after I quit drinking to realize that I was really my own worst critic. My first husband was pretty good, but I was quite good at it myself. I got to where I welcomed blackouts. Unfortunately, my ex-husband thought that I should know everything I did, so he would fill me in the next day on what I had done. So there were many good times in Australia, but the drinking was not a part of the good times. I look back and even though I understand alcoholism to some degree now and know that I'm an alcoholic, it's hard to believe that I continued treating myself and others the way I did when I was drinking, toward the end of my drinking. I kind of tricked myself into stopping drinking. I left Australia and came back here because my ex now ex, said that he would have me watched and followed wherever I moved to in Australia. And I knew he would and could do that. So I decided I was going to come back here, and I was going to stop drinking for a few days, maybe a week, long enough to not be drunk or hungover for 2 or 3 days in a row, so I could make what might be a good decision about the rest of my life. It didn't take too many days for me to realize that I had a real problem. The withdrawals were not fun. I didn't go into a treatment center. I didn't even know such things existed. I holed up in a room in my mother's house here in Southern Pines and called people that I knew that were in the program and said, how do you do this? What do you do with your time? How do you survive this? And different people in the program did help me. And I finally got the nerve. I still didn't want to admit I was an alcoholic. I knew I had a drinking problem, but I wasn't ready for AA. And finally, I knew that I had to learn how to live in this existence without alcohol, and I didn't have the first clue how to do that. So after probably 25 times of being urged to go to AA meetings, I finally went to one. And it was a speaker meeting, and I didn't want to be noticed, but I did want to be noticed. But I sat at the back of the room, and nobody came and said hello on the way in or while I was there or on the way out. And I went home and called someone that had been in the program a couple of years longer than I had and said, okay, that's not for me. I'm not going back. Don't belong there. Don't know what I need, but that's not it. And he said, well, you know, there's a really good group on Tuesday night at Bronson. There's a big book group. Just give it one more try and, you know, see what you think. And I came. And Tom Ivester was there. I know Tom doesn't mind me using his full name because he does it all the time. And I saw varying degrees of sobriety around the room because as still is the case, a lot of newcomers tend to gravitate toward Tom and the energy he has. And while I didn't feel like I saw somebody that looked just like me, I didn't feel as out of place as I usually did. And I saw something in Tom, an enthusiasm, a joy of life that I hadn't seen in probably since before my dad died, to that degree. And I wanted it. I wanted it very badly. And he was actually chairing the meeting that night. And he also was in charge of the newcomers group that night. And by the time the night was over, and he said, do you have a sponsor? And, helped me out. And I was hooked. I continued to come. He even let me make coffee, even though I don't drink coffee, and they only let me make it for about 2 or 3 weeks because it's so bad.
Good plan.
I wish alcohol had done to me what coffee did, and then we could have quit drinking it. But anyway, I did start to get a little sanity in my life. Start to get enough sobriety in my life that I could enjoy moments of my life, truly enjoy them. Before I came to the AA meeting, when I was trying to quit drinking, and the cravings were so horrendous, and I really did not know how I would get through them. I wasn't a religious person. I'd gone to church as a child and gone through the motions, but I remember reading the big book in Australia when I thought maybe it could help me then, and thinking, no, I'm not a spiritual person. This won't work for me. But before I came in the rooms here, and I had reached the end of my rope, and I probably sincerely, genuinely prayed for the first time in my life on my knees and said, please, please, I don't know who or what you are, but I can't do this alone. Please help me. And I felt like something warm and comforting came over me. And at the same time that came over me, the cravings just drained out of me. This June it'll be 23 years, and while there have been times where I've been aggravated enough, I think, gee, I wish I could have a drink or two, I have not had those cravings again. And not only did that help me physically and mentally and emotionally, but spiritually it made me believe that there was a possibility that I could have a spiritual connection. And that, to me, if I had to say one thing has been more transformative to me in my life than anything else in AA, it's been the spirituality that I have been able to gain and maintain and watch grow in myself and others. The sponsee that I've just taken on recently has really been struggling with that. And it's just such a neat thing to be able to see that work in her life. I used to think when I look back that when I quit drinking, that was it, I didn't have any trouble. To be realistic, I tried to quit drinking several times in Australia. I even called the helpline. I got a 12-step call. I was taken to meetings. My husband was sure I was having an affair, so I found a good reason to quit going to meetings, because he sure wasn't going to go with me. But I did, I was given a big book. I did read it. I did come to grips with, my problem was worse than I realized, that I had a lot in common with these people in this book. It didn't stop me drinking, but it did give me pause for thought every time I started to get drunk afterwards, so it kind of messed up my, I don't know if they were happy-go-lucky anymore anyway, but if they were going to be, the big book had kind of messed that up for me. So even though I only picked up one white chip, there were a lot of times I tried to quit before I came into these rooms that I wasn't able to. I truly was, the first, second, and third steps definitely applied to me. I was powerless over alcohol. I am powerless over alcohol. And the only way that I don't drink is through the grace of God. And my concept of God is different from a lot of people's. I truly believe after that experience I have felt that God, whatever God may be, and I think God's bigger than our tiny little human minds can actually put in a box, that God is in essence in all of us and always has been and always will be. And my recognition of that and my acceptance of that has brought me more peace than I can describe. But if it were not for that sense of peace and sense that this truly is a higher power, and yes, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life and I still make mistakes in my life, but I am not a mistake. And that's what I believed until I quit drinking, was that I was a mistake. I was a burden on my family. They were going through money troubles when I was born. They gave me 2 guys' names at the time. Dana was a man's name, and my middle name was a surname from back in my mother's family, Dana Vincent. And I thought, okay, they wanted a boy. So this was all stuff in my head, little things going around in my head. But I'm so grateful to this program for not just for my being able to not take a drink today, but to realize that this disease is physical, certainly, but it's also mental and emotional. And I cannot take a drink, and I can still be as crazy as I was then if I let myself go back to the thinking that I got used to when I was drinking. And if I'm not vigilant, if I'm not continually, many times a day, aware I'm an alcoholic, and I need to let go and let God, I get back into that thinking very quickly. Doesn't matter how long it's been since I've had a drink. I still have to be vigilant today. I have to be aware that I'm not in charge. I will very quickly drive myself crazy if I don't do that, as my current husband will attest to, and drive others around me crazy too. But being sober for a while, after about 1.5 years, I guess I got the message from God that I needed some more help than just AA. Still in AA, but I woke up one morning feeling like I had the day after I'd had my last drink. And it'd been 1.5 years. And that, needless to say, freaked me out. I went to the first meeting I could find, which happened to be a men's meeting. But they were good enough to recognize that my need was greater than their need for just men, and they let me sit in, and they helped me, and they listened to me and guided me. Somebody recognized that I had a pretty severe episode of anxiety and depression, and I needed professional help. And I started on that road, and it did help. I needed medication. My pink cloud had crashed, and I needed medication, and I'm still on medication. And I look at it, when I started taking it, people were critical of us taking anything when we were in Alcoholics Anonymous, some were. And I looked at it in a way that, okay, if I were a diabetic, would they be critical if I took insulin? I wasn't taking drugs to get high. I was taking drugs to be normal, and there was a big difference. And I also found that I needed a lot of therapy, and I've learned an awful lot about myself and about life and about forgiveness and letting my mother be who she is, which that probably was one of the longest nuts to crack in my head. At this point, my mom's 96, going on 97, and I'm her primary caregiver. And she still lives in Southern Pines in the same house where I sat in the room and got sober. Life has thrown a lot of curveballs at me, but as long as I know that I'm not in charge and that something will be shown to me, it's just life. It's been hard looking after my mother, seeing someone you care for deteriorate. And I don't do it single-handedly by any means. There are people who do it for me, but I'm kind of the decision maker. And that is a big responsibility for someone who didn't take responsibility for anything until 20 years ago. And stress became a large issue again when that was something I was doing. And my doctor was adamant that I had to look after the stress. It was going to kill me if I didn't. And I said, yeah, but. 4.5 years ago, I had a subarachnoid brain hemorrhage brought on by, they believe, stress. Imagine that. Also, probably some of the injury when I was married to my first husband could have damaged things to the point that I had bleed. And I still have some physical problems from that. But I was not supposed to get anywhere near as healthy as I am now. So I'm not determined to get better. I am determined to open myself to God's will. And I'm finding different things that help me from the most unexpected places. And I thoroughly enjoy the surprises of where I find help and where I find ideas. When I look really hard, I don't find them. When I stop and take a breath and turn it over, it's pretty quick that something comes along that helps me. Whether it's, it's a beautiful day, go outside, not when there's pollen, but breathe a lot. Take a walk, enjoy this. Okay, I've got a stress headache. Well, then maybe I need to stop what I'm doing. There are things that I have learned, and when I say I have learned, I don't know it all by any stretch, but I have learned some from the big book, from people in these rooms, from therapists, from others, things that I need to do on a regular basis. One of the things that I learned that's real important to me every day is someone talking to a kung fu specialist, teacher, guru, whatever you want to call him, dojo. No, that's where they practice. What is it? Sensei. Thank you. They asked how he stayed centered all the time. And he said, I don't. I just come back to it quickly enough that nobody notices that I've been away from it. And my being in touch with my higher power is that way. No, I don't dwell on it. I don't think about it every second. But I've had enough years now practice of coming back to letting go and turning over that I do it much more quickly and easily than I once did. I don't chase my neuroses like I used to and get completely tied up in them. Or if I do, I let go pretty quickly. And actually, we all have heard the word neurotic and neuroses. And I didn't know until a couple of weeks ago at a meeting, it came up in the daily meditation or daily reading, the daily reflection, that something about our neuroses that we needed to overcome. And somebody looked up neuroses so they'd know for the meeting. And it is the incongruity and the struggle between our conscious mind and our unconscious mind. And I thought, wow. How many times I said I won't take a drink? And I did. How many times when I'm doing anything else unhealthy and I say, I'm not going to do that, and I do. Well, I'm not in control. My subconscious mind is stronger than my conscious mind, and I have to believe that God, my higher power, has my best interest at heart, and when I quit trying to, struggle my way through controlling myself through the day, my day automatically gets better. And that is a gift beyond compare. I would like to say that I have no depression or anxiety or egocentric things going on in my life, but that wouldn't be true. And I do still, as I said, go back to the thinking the way I thought my whole life. I just don't stay there as long as I used to. And with whatever comes along, I've learned a little better to say, no, I can't do that. That was a tough one for me. And I've learned to allow myself to listen and try to be open to whatever I'm meant to do, rather than what my brain tells me I should do. And it guides me in good ways. I got eventually, after a few years of sobriety and therapy, and I got into more spirituality, meditation, true spiritual connection, wanting to deepen that connection. And after a few years, I met my now husband, and he had been going through not the alcoholism. He can take a beer and drink half of it and forget about it. Which still just amazes me, but we met and we were ready for a relationship, and it's been 19 years. So many things have come into my life since sobriety, AA. And Tom Ivester still seems more at peace than most people and happier than most people I see. And I told him how much, several months ago, I enjoyed being around him because of that. And he said, let me tell you how I start my day. He said, if it's at all possible, I go outside. Back then his pump was running, so he had a little fountain in the yard, and he would sit by it. And first he would thank God for allowing him to live with not one but 2 terminal diseases. And then he would ask to be open and aware of God's will for him. And then he would say, do not let me get so busy in this day that I will neglect noticing if somebody needs something from me. And that takes you out of that centeredness. That lets you be aware of the people around you. And if you're aware of the people around you and what they need, it's so much easier not to get caught up in all that gerbil on the wheel in the brain that I have gotten to know as a full-time resident, a little more part-time these days. But that, when I start getting snarled up, that's something I go to is what he says in the morning. I may say 20 times a day. Some days the Serenity Prayer gets used a lot of times in a half an hour. But if I breathe and I listen and I totally focus on it, it always helps. I'm just really, really grateful that I'm alive. Again, that I was allowed. I had a 5% chance of surviving the brain hemorrhage I had. It was profound enough. And only like 10% of the people that survived were able to function afterwards. So I'm here for some reason. And I'm not sure I know what that is, but it might change daily, and I try to open myself to it every day, because I never know when I might get that answer, or part of an answer, or one of the answers. So I'm really grateful to be alive, and I'm grateful to be sober, and I'm grateful to be able to form real relationships with people and with myself. I'm getting to where I'm not my own worst critic. I read something the other day that said that if you had a friend that talked to you the way you talk to yourself, you wouldn't be their friend for long. And it's true. You know, you start beating yourself up very quickly, and it's an old habit and not noticeable for the most part. So I'm trying my efforts today, besides staying sober and staying healthy and not having another brain hemorrhage, are to notice when I have negative thoughts, whether they're about me or my life or someone else. In my way of thinking, there is one judge. It's not up to me to judge myself or judge others. If they ask my opinion on what they're doing, if there's something I can tell them that might help them feel better, I certainly will do that, but I am not greater than anybody else, and I don't have the right to say, oh, you screwed up, even to myself. So, yeah, that's uncomfortable. How can I do it differently? That's cool. Bless you. But it's been a learning process. It still is a learning process, and I have to assume as long as I'm alive, and maybe afterwards, it will still be a learning process. But I'm very grateful to be here today and to be in these rooms tonight, and thank you for asking me.